welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. If you like this here show, make sure you leave us a review on Podchaser. Or, alternatively, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or elsewhere, please consider leaving a review and a rating. If you're checking out the Christian Reeve podcast on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to support the show, why not check us out on patreon.com/Christian Reeve and get yourself exclusive bonus content and bonus podcast content. How about that? Okay, I've had my fun. But seriously, if you want to support the show, it really, really helps us out. So thank you so much. And thanks again for listening. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is an estate planning probate attorney, I think I got that right, and owner of Willingham and Galvan. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Taylor Willingham?
Yeah, it's just Willingham and Galvan.
Okay. There wasn't a dramatic pause. I was just like, do you know what it is? I write these notes down. Okay, I always have notes every time I do a show. So here's my list of notes for this show. And sometimes I look back at my writing and I'm like, what is that? What? And I realize like, oh, I'm recording now. I'm doing a show. So I can't sit there and go, because, you know, dead air, dead space. And stuff. So there you go, guys. Even I still get nervous after all this time. This was one of those shows where I had to like sit down and really actually learn what it is you do before I could and I'm still learning, but like, and I often have to do this, guys, whenever there's a topic where it's a little bit more complex, I have to sit down, research it, so that then I understand what kind of questions to ask and what people will want to know. So I have an idea of it, but let's just pretend I know nothing. Walk us through, in general, estate planning and probate law.
So estate planning is the idea that people want to sit down and plan for two things: when they pass away or the possibility of becoming incapacitated. So I sit down with people and we go over those two scenarios and kind of what they want to happen. So that is the basic gist of the estate planning side. The probate side, what comes from common law tradition, common law comes from where you're at, Great Britain. But when people pass away, of course, there's a lot of different ways we could handle the transfer of property from one generation to the next. But in our tradition that we follow, it's usually done in two ways. Either if you do nothing, state law tells it, or not in the UK, but the law that is created of the country tells us where the property will go, or you do a will or a trust or some kind of document. Well, in order to verify the actual heirs of property, who are the people who actually get it, you have to go through a process called probate. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but that is what probate law is you're going through that transfer of assets, make sure creditors are paid, different things like that. And throughout the world, since the United Kingdom conquered a lot of the world, we use the common law system that was created, and it's still used today in Texas, where I'm at, and other places. So that's generally the big two areas. And a third thing I do a lot of is what's called elder law in the United States. We don't have universal healthcare. So we have issues of when elderly people become impoverished due to a long-term care issue. How do you finance that? How do you help people in those situations? So I do a lot of work with that. So
one thing I've always been interested in, actually, with America, and I've had a lot of American guests on the show over the years, and it's always become very apparent that every state is essentially like a mini country. Obviously, you've got federal law, which I understand to be applicable to every single state in the United States, but then state law, as you said, is that's specific to the state. So in your case, Texas. Let's say you must have come across this at some point where you're dealing with an estate, a will, etc., for a family, but you've got some people maybe from a different state
and then some people based in Texas. Like, how do you approach that, given that laws in other states will be different? Like, does it? I guess it depends fundamentally on if the property owner is in based in Texas, then you go by a Texas state law, right? Or like, how does that
Yeah,
work?
yes, and so there's a lot of different ways that we can approach it, but the big issue comes with real estate because it's called the law of situs. And so where real estate, where a property is located, the state governs that law of how it transfers. The good thing is in the US, it's a lot simpler than most places because like I have no idea if you're like an attorney in United Kingdom. Well, and someone owns land in France. Well, how do you deal with that problem? That's like that would get a lot more complicated than our system because we all kind of generally have the same understanding and traditions, except for Louisiana. That's the only one. Yeah, because Louisiana was a French colony, and so they follow the Napoleonic Code tradition. So
Okay.
it's a little different there. So even Texas is right next to Louisiana, and so we get issues all the time that are like, I just tell you need to go to an attorney in that state because I don't understand how they're going to handle this. So we have that one little state that throws a wrench in different things, but for most part, everybody kind of follows the same tradition, follows the same system, but there is little nuances that create problems, really big problems when you make assumptions that you know something about another state. So sometimes you have to get an attorney involved in that state to go, oh, okay, well, what do we do for this situation? For example, in Texas, we don't have a state, what we call an estate tax. So when someone dies, the government's always trying to get your money. And so one way to get money from people is when people die. And so we call that the estate tax. I imagine in the UK, they have it too. Um, and so each state can have one if they want. Texas doesn't do it. There's a federal one that we have to be aware of. But someplace like Oregon, for example, they tax anything over $1 million in assets. So I have to be aware of if people have property in Oregon, oh, we have issues that there might be a tax due if property's sold there when someone passes away. And so I need to be generally aware of all 50 states and kind of some issues that could arise. But the good thing is for the most part, no, I don't have to worry about every little thing. I can just say, Texas law is what we're going to use, and I'm going to create the documents according to Texas law.
What about if someone, I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, so I do apologize if some of these come up and it's a common question, but like, let's say someone passes away and they have no next of kin, no, relatives around, no one at all where it's obvious where the money could go to. Does the government just take that money then? Is that what happens?
Yeah,
That's
so
it?
in Texas, yeah, we have like you can go online now and look it up. You type Texas unclaimed property, and it's all the property that people have never laid claim to, and after 30 years, it goes to the state of Texas. So every country does this. Some do it quicker than others, but in Texas, it's 30 years, and then it becomes part. We say it escheats back to the state. So, um, and there's a lot of money in there in something because Texas has a lot of oil.
Hmm.
And the way that mineral rights work in Texas is passes down to, let's say you didn't do anything. You didn't have any kids. You didn't have any problem, but you owned all this land that had mineral interest rights. Well, the oil company's forced to pay that money into the Texas Unclaimed Property Fund. And so you can go online and see that there's millions of dollars of oil companies paying into the system that's eventually going to just go to the state. So maybe genealogy work, it would be good if you live somewhere just to like go back and look like, is there a chance I inherit but through some rich uncle, great uncle or something and get that property? I'd be interested to know if they do that in the UK because that'd be awesome. You could just go online and start looking around. But it's actually becoming a pretty big issue because the demographic change of people not having kids.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And so, beforehand, almost everybody had kids that they were leaving property to. Now it's very common. I've probably, monthly where people come in and go, I have no kids. I was the only kid from my parents. So I have no brothers or sisters. And so we're like trying to figure out, well, where are you going to leave your property?
Let's say someone passes away and they do have family, but nothing has been prepared in their will or anything like that. Does their stuff just automatically go to their family, or do you have to claim it? Is there some sort of legal process involved in that? Like, how's that work?
So uh, it's kind of weird because in the law it says it immediately goes to the family, subject to the estate. So,
Right.
like in the state of Texas, the way that works is we have what's called our intestacy law. Intestacy law is, well, if you don't do anything, a bunch of state legislatures, usually back in the 1800s, said this is how your property will be distributed. And so it's kind of that's what, when you don't do anything, that's what you're saying is like, well, whatever lawmakers decided years and years ago, that's what I want to do. And so in the state of Texas, we have that same thing. So it automatically transfers subject to the state. And that's where the probate process comes in, is you have to prove that you are the heir. We actually have one of the probate processes is called a determination of heirship. That's what you actually file with the court. I know it's just a very boring terms that we still use.
No, it's just it's intense, man. Like, because you could legitimately have like a claim, and they could just turn you away, and you'd be like, "But I am related to this person. I have a genuine claim."
Yeah, and that back in the day, especially, the issue came up before DNA evidence of someone claiming to be an heir and saying, women, all women know their children. That's not the issue. It's the man,
Right.
that we don't know for sure if he's and so there's a lot of claims that were made back in the day that judges denied their claims as heirs. And now through DNA evidence, it's turned out, oh, that kid was an actual heir and property's gone now. What do you do? One of the saddest stories I had, because stories are always the best. I had this family come in, and I'm sure you're very familiar with America's racial problems especially back in the day, what we had. And in Texas, in East Texas, back in, of course, the 1800s, that's where oil was found. And my family's from, has been in Texas since the 1800s. And so oil's been a big part of kind of the life here, is because that's how you got super wealthy, is find oil and everything changes for your family. Well, one of my clients they've tried forever to try to overturn what happened. But in the 1920s, they found a bunch of oil. They were a black family on their land. And the local sheriff found out, that they found the oil, and he went out and made up some charges and different things against the family, and basically got them to deed away their property to him in order to, not get in trouble with the law, because they were pretty much screwed if you're black in East Texas back in the 1920s. If you're going to any kind of trial, you're not going to win that. If a sheriff is saying you did something. So they deeded it away and they moved away. Well, in the 1960s, we had civil rights movements. Well, the family didn't really figure out what happened to about the 1970s and 80s. And that's when they started to try to reclaim the property, because unfortunately, still to this day, that sheriff's family still owns it, and it generates a lot of money. And so they filed suit multiple times through the 90s, in the 2000s. Everything was denied. Judges saying, "We're sorry, there's nothing we can do. It's been so long. It's been 50 years since this happened. There's statute of limitations." And so, and the families, yeah, I mean, I would knowing how much money this is, I mean, I'd still be upset about it. And so they were always just going to attorneys, seeing if there was an attorney that could figure out something. And so they came to see me because it was like, well, with all these new movements and, you know, these arguments that are being made, is there a possibility that we could go back and get that property back into the family name? And I said, well, there's nothing out there yet in the state of Texas that exists. But that is an example of like of how property can be lost through a process. And really there's no justice in the whole system after years and years of especially a lot of African American families in East Texas that lost out on inheritance rights to valuable mineral interest claims. Or the other sad one, of course, is just not very intelligent people not knowing what they're doing and signing away their rights and different things like that. And it's a very common story, especially back in the day.
It's difficult as well because, I mean, the way you're explaining it, is it kind of like how copyright law works, where if it's after a certain period of time, then you stop having like an ownership rights over it. Is it always, am I completely off the mark there?
Not mineral interest in Texas. We're gonna have to fix our laws.
Okay.
So I'll use an example of my own family. My let's see, it's probably about maybe about 4 generations ago, grandfather, he owned a bunch of land that has a bunch of oil rights and mineral interests. Well, of course, you can separate land rights from mineral interest rights. And people do this. They'll sell their land, but they'll keep the mineral interest rights. Well, why you do that in the state of Texas is because there's no tax consequence to mineral rights, but there is to land. So if you own land, you got to pay taxes to keep it, not for mineral interest rights. So it's created this problem in our family. He had, I think it was 18 children. Well, yeah. Yeah, back in the day in Texas, that's how you that's how you made money. Is you had to when you're a poor family, you didn't have slaves, you had children, and so they all broke up those mineral interest rights, and then those broke down to their kids and broke down till today. My dad still gets a check. He owns like 1/1000th of it. But it's the stamp that they put the check on to send out is more than what he's getting out of that property. And eventually, yeah, I mean, it's absurd, but it's like, eventually our state legislature is going to have to figure out that we have to bring these mineral interests back to get back to one person, maybe the landowner like Louisiana does. Louisiana figured this out and was like, hey, this isn't going to work really in perpetuities forever. We got to eventually have that property, those rights go back. And so they decided, well, after, I forgot how many years it is. I think it's like 30 or something. Whoever owns the land gets the rights back. And so something like that is going to have to happen in Texas, but no, we still do it that way where you can keep passing it down and down and down. And these poor, they call them landmen. That's their job. They go around whenever oil's found and they have to find all the heirs and then get them all to sign off and agree. And then, make sure that they get paid every month on their oil rights. So weird problems that no one ever thinks about, but exist because you do need someday rights to consolidate into somebody or something. So we're not having situations like my family property, which is absurd.
I mean, you must be like witnessing a lot of arguments over land ownership and land rights and this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's I own a title company too. So that's my other side of my business. What we do is we deal with property disputes and different things like that, and making sure people are actually buying the property they claim that they buy. Now, we don't have so much of it now because we're really good at dividing property up into lots and different things. It's not like most people don't know this, but back in the day, This is actually something that was very difficult for when the settlers arrived in America. The Native Americans really struggled with this idea at the beginning that you could own land. Like if you take just a few minutes and think about it, it's really an absurd idea. It's like, all right, you as a person have owned that. That's yours. And so when the Native Americans were first introduced with this concept that, again, you don't own that, it's everybody's, anybody can go there and anybody can do anything. And so it became this big problem. And like you can go back and read about like New York was sold for some ridiculously low amount of money, the whole island, because the Native Americans were like, okay, fine, it's yours. Give us that, basket of food. We'll take it. And then the European settlers were like, wow, they did this deal. They gave up their land for this cheap amount of money. And so it's a very common issue that we have. But back in the day, you didn't have lots and blocks that cities have done now. You had what were called meets and bounds. Literally, someone walked out to a property and they would find like a rock, and then they would walk like 20 paces a certain direction, and then they would go another direction until they got into a complete, either, all the way back to the beginning. And then they would map all that out into a big old legal description. And that's what you would own. Well, you can imagine that probably wasn't the most accurate way of really determining what someone owned, because some guy takes a little bit further steps than another guy, creates all type of issues. So as the years have gone by, and now you're trying to deal with these lots and blocks, the meets and bounds, and we're trying to go, okay, are you 10 feet over because this guy's trying to build this house? It is an issue that you face with the old property. Good thing now you can take satellite imagery, break things up, and know exactly what people own. And so we usually don't have issues in the cities. But on those old deeds that you go back and you run into all type of problems on, some guy had a bigger foot than another guy and walked a little bit further whenever he took a step.
What's some of the most common problems you're dealing with these days when it comes to property disputes and land ownership?
The number one is blended families. That is the biggest issue we face. And blended families.
Okay. What's that?
So when you have a kid outside of the marriage.
Oh.
So you have a husband or a wife, or two spouses, there's children outside of the marriage. And the reason why this is the biggest issue is because there's a conflict immediately when that person passes. Like, well, does the children get the property or does it go to the spouse? And, under Texas law, if you don't do anything, we give it to the children. We don't give it to the spouse. And so that creates all type of conflicts, because you have this person who's been married and they live in a house, and then this person passes, and then they find out their half of the property doesn't go to them, it goes to the kids. And so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with these issues of this person still living there? Now, we have a lot of things in the law to protect. We have like homestead rights, like the surviving spouse has a right to live there for the rest of their life. But these other kids, they want their property. And then you have the issues of like, well, who's responsible to pay the insurance on the house? Who's responsible to pay the taxes? Now, luckily in the law, we have all that written out, but most people don't like the answers when they get them. And so they're hoping they'll go talk to an attorney and we'll sue and we'll figure out a way to get around all that. Well, there really isn't, but it is becoming the biggest issue, I imagine, anywhere when you have this conflicting, because a lot of people go, well, I'm going to just leave everything to my spouse. Well, if you die, you leave everything to your spouse, but let's say you had 3 kids. That spouse continues to live on. They're probably not going to leave anything to your 3 children. So, you just disinherited your own children by doing that. So a lot of planning things that we do is we use what are called trusts. Trusts are where you can leave property to somebody, and still maintain control and say, I'll leave this to you, but when you die, it goes to my kids. And so blended families create our most difficult actual planning because no one wants to have those uncomfortable conversations. I have to force them, but I have to say, hey, if you die, you leave everything to your husband. There's a high likelihood he's going to remarry and give everything to a new spouse. I had actually had that situation happen where I said that forever. And then this lady got really mad at me for saying that. He goes, he would never do something like that. And I had to stop and just stare at this lady for a while because this was their second marriage. And he was literally doing that right at that moment. He was writing up a trust, leaving everything to her, nothing to his children. And so I just stared at her for a full minute, didn't say anything till finally it clicked in her brain. He is doing that at this exact moment. He is cutting out his kids, leaving everything to me. And if I leave everything to him, we're going to remarry and do that again. And so then she was like, okay, I understand why you created trust. So
I've always wondered about this as well. When a lawyer has to sit with a family and contest a will, and you've got like a disputes, like it must be a very uncomfortable experience because obviously it's your job to help them kind of move through that and figure it out. But you're just there to kind of outline the law and kind of give people options and be like, okay, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. But ultimately, it's up to you what you choose to do. But you also, I guess, have to act like a peacemaker, mediator. I don't know. Like, how do you deal with those situations when you've maybe got people arguing, maybe even shouting? Because there's obviously like, it's business, but it's personal. It's family. It's obviously people are still grieving over a family member as well. Like, how do you deal with those situations?
So it is awkward, when you're dealing, especially when people find out they're not treated equally. That's the hardest one for children because it's like a sign that you love this other kid more than me. So most of the time, though, I represent just one person in those disputes, but we get in weird situations like we were in one, and I remember I was just sitting there, and it was just so frustrating because they were arguing over a ladder, like who was going to get this ladder. Because it was every little thing we had to fight over. And I was sitting there, and there's me. The other brother had an attorney. There was a mediator, and everybody's billing hourly. And I was like adding up everybody's time, like every 15 minutes, what they were spending out as a state to handle this problem. And I'm like, by the time we resolved the ladder, they could have bought like 4 ladders from how much they spent to pay everybody to argue over all this. And and that's the hard reality conversation I have to have with the client, which is like, I understand principles. I understand all that. But at the end of the day, it's really math. We got to add up, what you're going to get out of this. Take my time when I'm going to charge you and make a determination. Do you want to actually pay me to fight that scenario? And a lot of times when you run the numbers, it's just not worth it. It's just like, you're going to make your life miserable for maybe getting a few $1,000s more. Not worth your time, not worth my time.
But was it a magical ladder?
Yes. it was their father's ladder. Like,
so it's a sentimental thing. It's like we want this ladder because dad worked on it and blah, 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 blah. That was what it was about.
No. It was definitely hate. I mean, this is how attorneys make money. I mean, when you get angry and you get in that mindset of, I hate you, you're a horrible person, you throw judgment out and it's, I have to win. I have to win every little battle. And some attorneys are very good at manipulating that and keeping the arguments going instead of resolving the problems. Because most attorneys make their money hourly. So if you want to sit here and fight all day, I mean, most attorneys I watch in mediations, they're sitting in a corner playing on their phone. And I realized like, he's billing $500 an hour to play on his phone. Like, uh, because at the end of the day, the attorney's just going to go, well, you got to resolve your disputes. I can't resolve them for you. But um, the when you get a client in that mindset, they will make horrible financial decisions to make sure the other side doesn't win. And you see it in divorce. I mean, family law all the time. When people are getting divorced, they do it. And it's so painful and it's so hard to watch people do that to each other when you really just go, well, why don't you just run the numbers? Because that's the thing about probate law and family law. I can tell you when you walk in my door, you give me everything, I'll tell you what you're going to get. I know. I know if you go all the way to trial, what's going to happen. And so do family law attorneys. All we are doing in the process is letting you figure that out. You want to pay us for the next year to work on this? All right. Sometimes it's the other side. You're doing everything right. Your brother won't listen. And so unfortunately, you have to pay me to make it painful for your brother so he'll finally figure it out. But the sad reality is we already know what's going to happen. And I have this conversation all the time. I know what's going to happen in the end. The law specifically tells us exactly what's going to happen. I recommend you just take it now, or you're going to just make a bunch of attorneys wealthier at the end of the day, because we're the ones that get it. We had an old probate judge that used to do that. He goes, you all can fight and you have a right to fight. He'd get everybody in the courtroom. He goes, but I want you guys to know one thing. Look at all the attorneys in this room. They will all get paid before you do. And that little line would resolve the dispute like half the time. The families would just walk out, like huddle up, and they go, we resolved our problems. Because it's like, they may not like each other, but it's like, I don't really like my attorney either. So I don't want him getting everything. So it was such a powerful way for the judge to get things resolved. Is he paid the attorneys. He made sure that they were paid.
This is the sad thing about law as well, isn't it? Like, it should be about like just getting the right thing done and justice. And like, we do see that, but you do see far more instances of like where it just comes down to money. That's why you see so many settlements as well, and so many instances. It's like, well, because some people, you just can't afford to be like, being in court is expensive. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you can literally find yourself in debt just because you're being like sued, and maybe even you're being sued unfairly for something. But you don't have enough money to defend yourself, so you'll accept a settlement or something like that. Or it just sucks, man. Sucks to see.
I know, and it's hard. I have to tell people. I have this conversation a lot that we don't have a justice system. We have a system that's based on money, and there is, of course, justice sometimes happens, but most of the time, in any type of situation, it comes down to money. That's why poor people get prosecuted and rich people don't, because the DA's office, when they sit behind closed doors and they realize, oh, we're going to go after a billionaire's son, that billionaire can finance the best attorneys and make the DA's office overwhelmed, and they just can't keep up. And go ahead.
I mentioned this on the previous show because, funnily enough, actually, my last guest, we spoke about criminology and true crime, and then this show happened. I didn't even plan for this, by the way, guys. It just happened like this, and I'm like, great. It's like every now and again there'll be like a new series. Like, I was covering near-death experiences, now I'm covering law. It's great. I love it. I mentioned, I'm sure you're familiar with the case of Vince McMahon that's currently going on right now in the United States, the former owner of WWE.
I know a little bit about it, enough to be dangerous.
It's interesting. Like, it's not the first time he's been under investigation, and he's always won in court or settled. And I find it very interesting now, the moving parts, the way things are working, because it's like he sold all his shares in this company. He's not part of that company. They've distanced themselves. They've pushed him out. You know what I mean? He's just a guy defending himself, but he's a billionaire. This is something you have to keep in mind. And I said this on the previous show. I'll say it here again. Like, I think this is a person who will probably get off, probably will, you know, get out of it.
Yeah.
However, let's suppose he didn't, because I want to make this relevant to this show today. Let's suppose he didn't. Now, WWE for the longest time was a family business, the McMahon family, right? Now it no longer is, but it was. So now, obviously, Vince McMahon has an estate. He has all these different investments, money, properties, etc., etc. Let's suppose he goes to prison, or touch wood, like he passes away, something horrible like that. Like, then it's going to come into, well, how do we divide up this estate? Now, I'm sure he has like an estate, things planned out, stuff like that. But as I understand, there's a lot of, I say, problems in that family, allegedly, like there's issues. I could definitely see a dispute situation going on there. How would you even begin to manage a situation like that, given what's at stake and like how much money is involved and properties, etc.? Like on a scale that large. Let's say that that was your case. Like, how would you approach that?
Well, first you need a small army to actually approach it because
Right.
it's you're when you get to billions, you're almost getting to some nation's wealth. And so you can't really resolve it like, but the first tackle in America, we have to deal with the estate tax problem. That's going to be the biggest hit. I tell people this all the time. It is the IRS that is your worst enemy than any lawsuit, anything else, because they're going to come in and they're not going to just value what he actually has. You know, they're going to actually put value to his name, and they're going to expect taxes to be all. Now, this is Michael Jackson's estate, what caused a huge problem, and which caused it so the family was going to have to sell off all of his because they said, well, Michael Jackson's name is worth, I think they said $300 million. Well, anything over $13 million of an individual in the United States is taxed at 40% when people pass away. And so if all of a sudden, let's say they came in and said, well, Vince McMahon's, well, he might have destroyed it, but let's say it was worth something and they say it's worth $100 million, his name alone. Well, that's a $40 million tax that's owed, but that's not an actual tangible thing. You got to actually have a buyer that's going to buy that. And then the hard part about when they do things like that for famous people is the family loses the name of the individual and they don't own the rights anymore to it.
Whoa,
So,
back up a second. What do you mean?
yeah. So like, well, if like in Michael Jackson's situation, I think the family was able to successfully argue at the tax court that it was overvalued.
Yeah, and I'll add to this as well, just real quick, that I remember he was in serious debt. Like he was already, I think he'd already either was selling off or sold Neverland Ranch, a bunch of other things. Like he was liquidating assets and stuff. Like he was in debt, you know.
Yeah. And so creditors get, the IRS is the first creditor that gets
Sure,
paid, but
yeah.
then you have all the other creditors. And so with Vince McMahon, but even if we go back to Michael Jackson, the family was going to lose, everything under his name to some corporation that's going to come buy it. And it's a distress sale, so they're not going to get that 300 million because, who are the corporations that one will want to buy it? No person can buy Michael Jackson's name. It's going to, well, I mean, there's a few people that could, but it's going to be forced. So there's not going to be a good opportunity to negotiate a deal. And so it happens all the time it's sad, but it happens all the time to these famous people that don't do any planning. They don't sit down and go, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster for my family. How do we start getting these things out of my name to my family now to avoid these estate tax problems? So that's first that you have to, if you're representing him. Second problem they're going to have is if he is found guilty is you're going to have a lot of claims from people against him that are going to be litigated for decades out. So you're going to have attorneys that you're going to have to hire for a long to be able to deal with the fact that, you're going to owe people money for damages that you caused. And then after you get through everything, you're going to have to, do we really know his family? Do we know everybody do you know all, he's a man. So we always have this problem with men. Do you know all of his kids? Are they all part of everything? Because people are going to come forward and make claims. And so someone like that, you're going to want to try to get most of those guys, they've moved money, especially to offshore trusts, where they're putting, special protected havens where large sums of money are held, where no one can get, U.S. law doesn't even apply. And so a lot of planning like that is done for those individuals. But you get a small army, and most billionaires, they have basically attorneys that's all they do for them all day. They are their estate planning attorneys dealing with it every single day, getting money out of the estate, working things out, and handling all of that. And you can actually met a guy that was his job. He did it for a very rich man. He just worried about his estate constantly and trying to reduce taxes.
The thing that I'm struggling with here is like I understand in principle how a person's name or business, etc., can be valued at a certain amount. Like I remember, this is really going back when I was studying business in my younger years. I remember this idea of like there was like rankings for businesses based on perceived value of said company. So like at the time, Apple was the biggest in the world, may still be, I don't know. But and the amount that it was valued at based on its influence and potential, etc., was vastly more than what it was actually worth. And I always looked at stuff like that as being like, well, that's a perception thing. You can argue that, but in a court of law, really, it should come down to perceived assets, money, what's available. Do you know what I mean? Like if you could sit and argue all day about how valuable potentially like Michael Jackson's name was, but the reality is like you got to look at what you have in front of you. So like at the time of his death, you had royalties from his music and appearances, etc. You had any money that was he still had left on him, his properties, and then investments, anything tied that he had put aside or set up. Other than that, I mean, like I don't know. Like I guess what I mean
Yeah.
with this is like I'm sure there's many celebrities out there, and you hear about this sometimes where they had a very successful career, but they were terrible, mismanaged their money, whatever. Now they have nothing, and it's really sad to see. But it's also at the same time, it's like, well, they might still have name value, but they have nothing. And
Yes,
not like
they have no liquid assets to cover what's being happened, so they make them liquidate
right.
their assets in order to cover what they, because that's the sad part is the way that it's defined is it's not, when you die, we don't add up what, liquid assets you have. We add up all your assets, and those include illiquid ones, and it's anything the IRS can show has monetary value that someone would want.
What are some of the like illiquid assets that maybe people aren't familiar with? Because I can think of ideas. I mean, again, this is like really going back for me, like old school business 101.
Yeah.
I know some of it comes down to maybe the potential of what a company could raise. Let's say if you owned a business and it was projected to earn a certain amount within the next 3 to 5 years, that could be an example of like illiquid, I guess, because it's perceived value rather than something that's actually there.
Yeah, land is the biggest one people face.
Sure,
Is
right.
so you get your land and like, oh, like right now I'm taxed every year on what my county appraisal district office says my house is worth. Well, it's not worth that to me right now because I can't just get that money out of it. So land is a very big one. One that's probably going to become a big issue is like as you keep working on your podcasts, it's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to get more and more valuable. And then if it's generating a lot of money someday, and you're going through and this is your thing, think of Joe Rogan when he started. No one watched it. I went back and watched the first episode and was like, this is awful.
Oh, dude, I think
uh,
about this all the time. Like I was actually looking back at some of the old episodes I had, and I was like, I guess, yeah, there is a lot of growth and potential there, and it has obviously changed a lot over time. I think with Joe Rogan, I take a lot of inspiration from that because, yeah, I think it took him a good like 300-400 episodes before it actually started getting good. And it's not to say he wasn't trying; he's working hard, but he hadn't like ironed out his setup. Like
Exactly.
I have big dreams for this show. Like I imagine having a similar setup as much as having people on hand to help me with it. But I think I've got the format locked in. What I want is to be able to do this show physically. I'd love to be able to offer people to invite people. For instance, fly you in, book you a hotel, have you sit down, we drink coffee, and we do the show that way. So if that ever happens, Taylor, you can be rest
I'll,
assured you get an invite, and that'll be the package.
I'll come on there. I'll help you out. So like, okay, now that we got to worry about how you're going to set this up. We get things structured right. But that is something that I think about when I'm especially now, because so many people just don't know, hey, I start working on this and it grows into something much bigger and more valuable. And then all of a sudden, someone passes away, and then all of a sudden the IRS comes in and goes, oh, well, their podcast is worth this. And the family's going, it doesn't generate that. Like, how are we supposed to pay for that? But it is one of those big issues that we're facing. It's one of the other things that we talk about a lot when we're planning with people is, you don't really realize what you're doing right now, but as long as the internet continues, do you have kids?
No, not yet.
Okay. If you ever do have kids, and when that happens and they have kids, 3 or 4 generations down the road, these videos, if they're still out there, your great grandkids are going to go back and watch. Exactly. Now, yeah, wait.
That's weird to think about. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
And think about like how valuable that's going to be to them.
Sure.
I mean, if you could right now go on the internet and watch a video of your 4th great grandfather and find out what was going on in his life, I mean, most people would pay good money for something like that. They would love to see, walk out and that's how you milk the dairy cow. It's like yeah, it would be very interesting. And then my little tidbit, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say it, but with my friends, I was joking around. I was like, all those girls doing OnlyFans now, got to realize your own descendants will someday probably see that. So
I mean, I have mixed feelings about this one. And I'll tell you what, I recently had a friend on who does OnlyFans, and she has the full support of her family and stuff, her husband, etc. And we broached that question. We asked about like, well, what about when your kids are fully aware of this? And she's actually had to talk to one of her daughters about it, and like they're on a level about it. But that is something you have to think about. You have to kind of explain that. I mean, the way I look at it is that sex has always been something that has been sold, exploited, etc. And I'm not talking about like prostitution. I mean, just in general, like look at society right now. It's in everything. It's like even something that's not supposed to be sexual has that contained within it. Now, I think from a business perspective, it can be sold like the concept. I mean, in any shape or form. Like it's just pictures, it's just videos, it's really no different to any other form of content. But one thing I think is really interesting, actually, you mentioned generations down the line. I'm interested to see, okay, let's say 50 years from now, is this still going to be a form of content? What if society changes and now it's illegal, just for argument's sake? Are we going to, and not just for stuff like that, but anything in general? Let's say stuff we're doing right now, like podcasts become illegal. Like, what do? You can't plan for like 50 years from now and how society is going to change and how the things that we deem acceptable now are not acceptable 50 years later. And obviously change is inevitable, but it's hard to really gauge and think about. I think a lot of these girls, I would wager, are probably looking at it purely as a business thing. Like, I can make money from this right now. I could set myself up, and more power to them, I think, because if you can, great. Do you know what I mean? If I had a business opportunity right now that I know would set me up for life, I would 100% go for it. But I do share your concern because it is something that, like, there are consequences to it. There are, for instance, I reckon there are certain forms of work where you would be discriminated against because you've done this form of work, which I think is unfair. I don't think it changes your ability to do any job. Do you know what I mean? But I get why that happens.
Yeah, for me,
It's a tricky one.
the thing I would like to see happen is, especially because we allow young women to do this at such a young age, is that they have legal rights to the content that they can have it taken down if they want to in the future.
Mm.
Because a lot of these girls don't understand is like, yeah, you're doing it now, but you may change during your lifetime and not want that out there anymore. But you don't control these platforms control these rights. And I think there's some things that we have to look at and go, okay, well, it's one thing when you're doing a podcast. There's another thing when it's pornography. Someone should have the rights to always be able to go down in the future and say, I don't want my content out there anymore. I've changed my mind.
It's tough. I mean, I think the biggest example of that in modern times is probably Mia Khalifa,
Yeah.
where, she did this stuff in her early 20s. And as I understand, she was paid like a flat fee for it. But the company that she did that for owned all the rights to it. She was very successful. Now, all these years later, she's mature, she's changed. She obviously retired from all of that. And she wants to do other things with her life. And she wants to, get it all taken down. But she can't. She doesn't own that content. Right. And also, how do you go about doing that once it's out there on the internet? Because this is the thing. If we're talking about a platform, let's say I uploaded this content onto, I'm not sure how Patreon would deal with this. I have a Patreon, by the way, patreon.com/Christian Reeve. Go check it out. That platform blocks your content. So you can't access it if you're not a paid subscriber, and people can't download it, make videos of it. They could try, but I think there's systems installed to prevent that from happening. So anyway, there's ways to protect you. There's ways to protect yourself in the future and get that taken down. But if you put your stuff out there for free, anyone can access that and use it, and it's out there forever. And I think it's very difficult to scrub that fully from the internet. Like, I had a guest recently reach out to me, and she'd appeared on my podcast years prior, and the show that she'd been on at the time, she was with a partner who was unfortunately quite abusive and stuff like that. And she'd forgotten that she'd been on my show before. Yeah. And I was like, aren't you this person? She's like, oh my gosh, yes. I didn't realize that was still online, because she's been trying to get rid of all this content related to that time in her life. And I was like, of course, hey, listen, I'll take it down, no problem. But here's the thing. I know where I uploaded it, and I obviously removed it from those places. But there's like third-party things. Like with podcast, there's a thing called the RSS feed, which gets thrown onto like a bunch of websites. So I know that this podcast is at least on, say, 9 to 10 different platforms that I'm aware of, but it could be on like 20 or 30 other ones where it's just been pulled, downloaded, shared, etc. And I have no control over that. Yeah. I could try and sue them, and I'd probably win, but it's like you'd be doing that till the end of time. Do you know what I mean? Because it's out there on the internet. It's there. It's available. How do you even begin to claim that?
Yeah, like I was just watching a thing. Jake Paul's going to fight Mike Tyson, and I was just watching.
He's gonna die. He's gonna die. Nah, this is sorry. I just on the side note that this is just money fight. We all know it's gonna be. Like, if it was a legitimate fight, it'd be over in about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So I was watching, and it was. Someone was posting Jake Paul when he was like 13 dancing, going, "This guy's going to fight Mike Tyson." and I thought, man, I bet you Jake regrets posting that video every time it pops up on his feed. But it's a great point. I think with AI, it will probably become a lot easier to start going at. But then you have the dark web where, people can just put anything out there. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, the only way you can handle something like that is like what we do with credit cards. We make the big institutions responsible for it, where you would go to them and say, hey, you're responsible to make sure when people request their images to be taken down, that you're going to take them down. And I think with AI in the future, we should probably be able to catch people and go, okay, well, this can come down. But of course, you have a lot of problems that goes across Like, well, what if someone paid you? Do you owe that money back, for that content, And so there would be things you'd have to work out in the process. However, it gets down to this. Kids today have to just be aware, like what you put out there will forever be out there. And don't just think when you're alive, think generations down the road. Like this is what is going to be thought of you, and you're putting out, that's your legacy. So make sure
It's hard though, isn't it? I mean, you gave the example there of Jake Paul when he was younger, like, oh, that's embarrassing. But then, he was a kid at the time. We all did
oh
silly
yes.
things when we were younger. And I know that's not what you meant, but like I'm just saying that, like, to a certain extent, I think certain things could be excused as, oh, you're growing up, you're changing, you're evolving, but you're 100% on, like, spot on with this. Like, what you did in your 20s, 20 years, 30 years later, like, you're probably, yeah, we'll get some of that, maybe all of it. I don't know. Um, we grow, we change, we evolve, but we can't hide from that. We have to accept it. And that part of that is, I've said it on the show before, it's part of the human experience. We have to own and accept responsibility for what's happened in the past. But we also have to remember that we're not the same person that we once were. But that's the thing, like, humans are quick to judge. Not everyone is at the same maturity level. So some people understand the journey and understand that it takes time to evolve. And that person that you're looking at now is not the same person from 20 years ago. But other people can't see that. They live in the past, or they live with this idea that people can't evolve, people can't change, etc. And I get that, but I think with things like content, it's difficult, really, isn't it? Because you're painting a picture of a person over time. I look back at some of the content I made years ago and I cringe. I think it's terrible. I'm like, why was I saying this? Why was I acting like this? But then I was evolving, I was changing. And I'm sure I will evolve and change again in the future.
Yeah, those are no, and that's great because we grew up in a time. I'm assuming I don't know how old you are, so
have a guess. How old do you think I am, Taylor?
I thought you were in your 30s, if I was to guess.
You're on.
Okay.
I'm 30 on the dot.
Okay. All right. So good. I'm close here. So when you were little, you didn't have this opportunity to go post your stuff out there, and and get it seen to the world. I didn't. I'm in my 40s, so I know there's videos of me that one of my friends has of us being a little crazy and wild in my teen years that I always go, man, if she ever posts those, like it's going to be really embarrassing. But I mean, nothing like horrible, but it's just like, embarrassing, cringy things that you do when you're a teenager. And I think about my kids all the time going, hey, you're going to put that stuff out there. But of course, we understand kids. It's not understanding that even as adults, we change. We grow. I'm very different in the way I look at the world now than 10 years ago. The way I approach things and my belief systems and everything like that, they change, often. And so, yeah, we're going to have to live with the fact that at all times, people are going to know what we were like at certain periods of our life. And just maybe it's going to make us more understanding and tolerant of each other, because we'll be like, oh, well.
Well, this is what I think as well. Like, by the time I have kids, like, I'd like to think I'd be in that mindset where, like, I could level with them and be like, look, I was your age once. I do understand, but here's why I'm telling you what I'm telling you, or trying to guide you, or et cetera, right? I think, like, parents often have a struggle when they forget about that stuff, and they're too focused on being a parent and trying to control their kids, or not, maybe not control is the right word, but like guide them in the right direction. But we have to accept that, like, our children, while they are ours, they are also individuals, and they're different. They're going to approach things differently, and you can't kind of force that. You can guide it, but you can't force it.
No,
But
this is a big discussion that's been had. I used to do criminal defense work way back in the day, and I'd go to CLEs, and we talk about this a lot, where you have these kids that are being arrested for things that that they're just age-related crimes. They're things that kids are doing during this time period of their life because they're exploring things or doing whatever. And we don't, in the state of Texas, we have very strict laws about expunging criminal records, and we don't let people do it very easily.
Oh,
It's
right.
very difficult. And so you don't, we talked about it a lot about how do you get the general public to be in favor of laws of letting people expunge their records, show that they can change. I mean, you have the example that just happened because this always what destroys it. The guy that went on Joe Rogan's podcast that was talking about he was in prison for years and years and years, and you hear about this, it just happened.
I don't know.
So apparently, I guess sometime in January, I think it was, a guy went on Joe Rogan's podcast and he was wrongfully imprisoned, and he got let out, and they just arrested him because they found a body in his apartment. They found a head, I guess.
Jesus.
I know. So I'm sure Joe Rogan's going, well, maybe I should have picked more carefully who I brought on. But guys like that are what caused the problems. Like we asked for we asked for reform in the criminal justice system, and it takes just one guy like that who go on there and say, oh, not that he was reform. He's saying I never did anything wrong, but and then he does something like that, and then people go, see, this is what all criminals are really like. And you're like, well, we're all criminals. These are just the ones that got caught. I have a really good friend that's a criminal defense attorney. He goes, you commit about 2 or 3 crimes a day, every day.
This is the thing. Yeah, there's so many laws we don't know about, little things. And I wonder this every single day. Like
difference is did someone decide to prosecute you or not? That's really the difference.
I look at it a lot like workplaces with like rules and policies. They tell you all these different things you have to do, but then you see other people, managers not doing it. But then as soon as they want to get rid of someone, oh my God, are they coming down on you with every single strict oh, you did this, but everyone does this. Doesn't matter. You did it. You're fired.
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's why they have all those rules, is so they can get rid of you when they want to. That's really what it is. It's like whenever the feds come after somebody in America, I go, well, that was nice knowing that guy. Because they're going to find 20 things he did. Like, you went on this website that's illegal to access because of this, and this, and it's so many different things that they can get you with. But those type of issues that we deal with when you're asking for reform and different things with laws, it's almost impossible to get it because you can always find the other side, which scares people. And so even if we could come up with a good law on helping, women that decided to do OnlyFans in their 20 and remove the content, it's like, well, they were compensated for it. How do you pay back the people that gave them money, saying we bought that and we own that right to that video? And so it makes it very, very difficult whenever you're making any law.
Could you not say though that content created by a person of themselves, like, do they not own the rights to themselves? Like, I get what you're saying, and you're right. Like, the company does have a stake in that because they paid them and they own the rights to it because it was posted on their platform, etc. And they gave them a platform, they gave them an ability to earn money, but that's still of that person. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That would be like if you paid me to do like a voiceover, right?
Yeah.
And then years later, I'm like, oh, actually, I want that content back. It's my voice. I own it. And it's like, well, yeah, but then I sold you the rights to using the voice in that specific context.
Yeah. The hard part comes into like, okay, Tom Cruise decides now he wants all the rights to his movies back because his image is in it. Well, it's like, well, we create all those movies for you. We put them out there. We rely on that structure that we created for you, benefit you. So it gets difficult. if this was actually going to be a law or put in place, Taylor Swift could do it right now. She has enough following. She could go in there and like she's complained about this repeatedly that she doesn't control a lot of her music and stuff that she sold off when she was younger, and she didn't have the ability to really negotiate contracts. So, but the problem is what Taylor Swift or any one of those people argue is a structure was built by certain people before you that allowed you to propel yourself to where you are now. And if you now had the right to get your content back, those people paid you at that time from something they built. And so how do you compensate them for the losses now they'll suffer?
A buyout, surely. I mean, if we're talking about the Taylor Swift concept,
yeah,
then surely the companies have to say, all right, here's a number, pay this, and we'll give you it back. Which sucks that it's like that, but then surely that's the fairest way to do it, because it's like and be a buyout of the rights.
Yeah, and so writing a law like that would be difficult, but
because it's literally pick a number, any number, like pretty much.
Yeah, but I still have an opinion of when it comes to pornography. I think, and especially at the age that they, maybe we have something that says after 25, then the girl or guy, I mean, it could be a guy too. There's a few out there. Then that content is you sell it. You're mature enough to know, but anybody under 25, 18 to 25 is they can ask for their content back at any moment.
It's an interesting proposal. Yeah, I like the idea of protecting younger people. I think, especially when it comes to because obviously when you're a lot younger, you know any and all opportunities just seem out of this world, because it's like you're earning a lot of money in a small period of time. And I think obviously as you get older, you realize that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But this is why I sit down and I preside over every contract I ever sign, because I'm like, I'm not letting them catch me. Like I had it, I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but there was a voice acting thing I did a year or two ago, and the person I did it for had forgotten to get me to sign it before they paid me. So they paid me, but I hadn't signed a contract yet. And they're like, oh, can you just sign this quickly and then we'll get this sorted. So I read it. And there's a clause in there about essentially it was AI, and it was basically they wanted to replicate my voice, clone my voice, have the ability to do that. And I was like, no way, I'm not signing that. And I messaged them, I said, hey, listen, I'll sign this if you can take the AI clause out. And then he said something along the lines of like, oh, yeah, that's fine, we can do that. But the client will probably go with someone else, blah, blah, blah. I think that was like an attempt at like being like, oh, well, if you sign the original, then we'll use you. And I'm like, no, I don't care. Like, I'm not gonna, that would be crazy because then they could sue you. See, this is what people don't think about, right, with the AI thing. And I will forever stump my foot down on this and shake my hand at the air with a fist. Like, listen to me, guys. AI is something you need to pay attention to, especially when it comes to business, because here's the reality. You'll use your voice, you'll sell your rights for it to be cloned. And then when you go to use that same voice for a different project, the company that you sold the rights to clone your voice can then sue you for using your own voice.
Yeah.
What? I've not seen it happen yet, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. And you don't want to be that test lawsuit. Like, I can imagine a judge being very hesitant of ever putting precedent like that out there into the world, because that would be damaging to almost everybody. Because, I mean, you go to work now and they're like, oh, well, we own your voice. And then all of a sudden, no one's able to talk anymore. But
well, I mean, you've seen it a little bit in some instances. I mean, like, just look at something like fingerprint scanning. Right? When you come into workplaces to clock in and stuff. Like, I just feel all kinds of uncomfortable with that, because why the fuck do they need your fingerprints? What are they using that for?
Yeah. But you make it. This is a great point. It's something, if you were to take a snippet out of this thing,
this will be a clip.
you need to get that out there, because there are so many young people that are so eager to oh, you'll be famous, but we're going to own your image and your voice. And they don't really think that through, what that really means. It's like, you don't want to be famous, you want to be rich. Those are very different things. If you're famous and poor, ask anyone who's famous and poor how horrific of a life that is.
Think about that for a second, guys, as well. Imagine that everyone knows you, you walk around everywhere and you never get moments of privacy, but you have no way of escaping it. You need to work a normal job. Nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to get any privacy. Imagine like you're doing a 9 to 5 or you're working in a coffee shop and you're a famous person. That's going to be hell. And they'll probably get rid of you because you're distracting to the business in some shape or form.
Yeah, you can't work certain jobs.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing you don't even think about. Like, you just can't go work at a Starbucks if you're super famous. Like,
there was levels, isn't there, as well? Like, I think about this a lot. Like, I used to years ago think that, oh, it'd be cool to be famous. And I think there are still some elements to being famous that I think would be cool. But at the same time, I think as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that, like, there's levels to it. Like, the Oscars just happened, for instance, and there were people doing things on there that I was thinking, like, I would never do that. I would never feel comfortable with that. It feels like a club. I'm not saying that, like, they're all crazy, but there are some interesting characters out there, and I'm not sure that I would want to be part of something like that. Like, I just want to do this. I've said this before, but all I want to do is be able to do creative stuff for a living, earn enough to earn a living from it, and be somewhat financially comfortable. Like, not struggling to make ends meet every month like I am now. I want to be able and not have to rely so heavily on hospitality as well. That's my only goals, really. I think it's very thankless, this idea of being famous. And I mean, you said it before. You need to be rich. If you're famous, you need to be rich. Or if you can't be rich, look at it like this. Every time you get an opportunity to make money, if you're watching this right now and you're famous or you're becoming famous, right? Start investing your money. Start investing it right now. Start making trusts, start making investments in, I don't know, bonds, whatever. Like, just invest that money and make money on top of that money, because you don't know how long you're going to be famous. Because let's face it, the industry is very thankless. We've seen it time and time again. If you take movie stars as an example, it used to be you get maximum 5 years off the back of your big movie that made you, right? And then after that, no one wants you. It's not to say you'll never have money or fame again, but it's a thankless industry. That's why that 15 minutes of fame thing exists. It's like, the reality is you have to bust your ass all the time. I recently had John Bailey, the famous voice actor, on my show, and it blew my mind that he has to do the same thing that I do, which is just posting like self-tapes and stuff every single day. And this is the guy who's been doing this job for like 17 odd years, and he's been like worked on like Marvel and stuff, but he still has to do what all the rest of us do and just continuously put himself out there and remarket and advertise and etc etc etc. Like, I don't know, man. There's so much I think you have to learn just as an adult functioning in society, and which brings us back to law. Like, it's so important to know your rights and to plan for the future, and to work with someone like yourself and plan ahead. Like, I know it seems morbid, but planning for your death in your younger years, probably a very smart move, because you've only got a certain amount of time that you can actually work for. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If it's physical, you've got a time limit on that. If it's mental, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know if you're going to develop a condition later down in years later, and now you're not able to use your mind in the way that you once were. Like, there's all these different things that can happen to you as a human being. So if you've got opportunities to make money and start making investments and planning for the future now, please, for the love of God, do it.
Yeah, my experience with dealing with people who have money, I meet every day. I meet people who have money.
Okay.
There is no like, oh, they followed this path. It is simple. They know how to save. Doesn't matter how much money they made, they were good at taking part of their money and putting it aside and saving. I have been with people who never made over $50,000 a year and are worth millions of dollars. I have been with people who are fabulously wealthy in the sense of they have huge incomes making millions of dollars a year and they don't have a penny to their name. Because it's hard. People like look at that and go, how is that possible? It's very easy if all of a sudden you get used to making a certain amount of money, going, oh, well, next month that check's going to show up. So I can buy that house. I can buy that car. It's easy to get in that mindset. It is not how much you make, it is how much you spend. You can find people all around this world right now that live better lives than probably me and you do, and they do it on less than $2,000 a month because they decided, oh, I'm going to move to this island that's very cheap to live, and I make my content there, and I can live this great life. And I know people pull that kind of stuff because it's not, I mean, the crazy thing right now for me that's really shocked me about young people is how much they stay in the places that they are with the opportunity so easily to work from anywhere. I'm stuck where I am. I own a building. I have employees. Like I have clients that are here that need to see me here. I'm stuck here. But then I meet all these young people and I'm like, you can work over a computer screen. Like this is, you can go anywhere. Why are you can leave the United States. There are places that are significantly cheaper to live. And the company says that I can only get a job making, $20 an hour doing that. You don't know how great you can live $20 an hour in the Philippines. And you just have to be willing to venture out into the world and go, but it's a different world than when I grew up. And, we were stuck. You had to go get a job somewhere and you had to be there. Now with the internet, you can be anywhere. You can create content anywhere around this world.
Speaking of content, you're on TikTok, which I found very interesting.
Yeah.
It's not the first time I've seen someone doing law related content on TikTok, but I found it quite interesting given the type of law that you're involved with. I gathered it was to help people and obviously I'd imagine to a certain extent to advertise, your business and help you in that essence. But how has TikTok been in terms of a tool for you? Has it been useful? What have you learned? Walk us through that.
So business wise, I would say with TikTok, it's probably caused me to do more work than I've made money off of. Because people always went, can you help me with this problem? And then I feel guilty because they're my follower. And I'm like, okay. So I'll message them back. This is what you need to do. I've gotten a few clients off of it, but really it's been more my platform to kind of warn people because I hate it when people come in and they don't know something and then it kind of bites them in the butt. I keep seeing stuff that's on TikTok that's incorrect, that are all these guys trying to sell stuff. And I keep having this like, oh, I should counter that misinformation. And and then I'm like, I don't want to be in that kind of a situation. Cause then I'm just in this, that guy's going to get pissed off. And then he's going to go like, yeah. And then I'm like, I'm just going to be fighting with somebody online over this. I'm like, if people want to believe some guy that doesn't even have a law degree that this is how you should create a trust and why you should do it, then I'm like, nope, that's your problem. You trusted someone that clearly didn't have the educational background for it. But so I have I used to create a lot of content on TikTok and I've slowed down because I'm like, I might be creating problems for myself if I keep doing this.
I wonder about that sometimes because it's like so much of your business is based on like reputation, I guess. So and obviously you're going to make that mostly through word of mouth and recommendations and reviews and stuff. I think it's good in the sense that like you're helping people. That's amazing. And, you're giving people correct advice, legal advice, which is invaluable. I mean, let's face it, like legal advice costs a lot of money and you're giving it away for free right there. That's huge, man. Um, but it's tricky also because everything you do, you always have to think about reputation. I mean, I have to think about that with everything that I do. Um,
Oh yeah, you say
it's
so. I say something that I thought was correct, and find out later, oh, it's incorrect. Uh, I would say the stuff I put out though is the vanilla stuff that I don't
sure.
go into the more complicated stuff that might cause some issues.
Mm.
So it's just more the warning thing. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it of sometimes, and then sometimes I'm like TikTok. uh, I put content out there on a lot of different platforms, and TikTok's always worked the best.
What would you say are some of the most interesting or standout interactions you've had with people on TikTok?
Um, the better ones was I've had a few people actually come in because they actually needed help with something. And
That
then I
must be weird,
had
by the way, just as a side note, like someone comes in and goes, "Oh, hey, so love to work with you. Yeah, I found you on TikTok." You're like, "Oh shit, yeah, I guess that's like
yeah
just another way that like it's weird though, isn't it? How things change." Like,
yeah that the good thing about what I do, when someone just comes in off of an ad, I have ads that I put out saying, "Hey, you need this, you need help." They don't know who I am. They don't know if they can trust what I'm saying or if I know what I'm saying is correct. So I have to spend like the first 15 minutes developing credibility with people
hmm,
like that. And
okay.
so, whereas video content, I enjoy those when those people come in because I've already established my credibility. So usually people have watched, 5 or 6 videos of that I put out about something. So now they're coming in, they're going, oh, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I can trust him. Um, so it's so much better of a meeting I can have with somebody because I can jump into, okay, let's actually go through your situation and figure out what we need to do. And I don't have to, what I feel like, explain why, because people go, some guy told me online that you don't need to trust, that it's just attorney trying to sell you something. And I'm like, well, sometimes that is true. That could be correct, but sometimes you do need it. And I need your information to figure that out, which one you fall into, which bucket. And so that is one of the great things about, you know, as you're doing your content out there, it takes a long time to eventually build that credibility because someone will come across and they'll see you and you'll say something like, oh, that guy said something smart. But then they'll go to the next person. Yeah, it takes like about 3 or 4 interactions with your content before someone goes, okay, now I'll subscribe.
You know, I think you're onto something there. I mean, most of the people I tend to attract, I've noticed it comes through live streams. I've done a lot of live streams, and I think that's a lot easier because obviously you're having more regular interactions. But
Yeah.
like you said, like they come across it like once, twice. I've had people go like, "Oh, you came up on my FYP," and I'm like, "Okay." Like I don't pay much attention to stuff like that. Like I just do
Yeah.
my thing. But I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
come join us, come drop a follow." I try to do CTAs and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I try to win people over in the live stream itself. Um, you're doing it through videos, and that works too. It's those interactions that form the basis of like a relationship, I guess. To establish like, okay, this is what I offer, this is why it's worth subscribing, this is what you get. Um, but yeah, it's not easy. So much I've said this on the show at nauseum, but like so much of the game is based on numbers. Um, I was thinking about this today. Like this is episode 260. 260 episodes of this show there's been over the last 4 years. I don't know many podcasts that have got to that, like ones of people I know. I know there's shows out there that have many shows, but you get to a certain point, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And that's the case with everything I do in my life. Um, but like it's not taken off. It's none of my stuff is taken off. Um, I don't really give it much thought anymore unless it comes up in a conversation like this. Um, or sometimes someone might say like, "Oh man, you should have more views," or "Why doesn't this have more attention?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just I just do my thing. I don't really pay much attention to if it does well or not anymore. Because at this point, well, I think at a certain point, it's just luck. You know, once you've done everything you can do, then it just comes down to like maybe your likability, the right person seeing you. Who knows, man?
I'll
Who knows?
I'll give you a little experience of mine. This will help you a little bit. When a new platform comes out, you need to jump on it as fast as you can. Okay. This is why. I started when YouTube, right when it kind of started coming out. I just graduated law school and I jumped on it. And I got up to about 300,000 subscribers
Damn.
and I was killing it. Like I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And this company contacted me and says, we'll take this over. We'll handle everything. Well, they didn't know what they were doing. And they got me banned, like that page banned.
Oh
Uh,
shit.
but I understand their situation. This is right when Google was taken over, and Google actually could track because they were trying to do things that were totally shady, and like getting people on. But I didn't need it. It was like I was like one of the first attorneys to kind of jump on and do things and start thing. So easy to create content. I jump off. I'm like, I'm not doing that, and I was like, that's stupid. They're wasting my time. I waited about 6 years, tried to jump back on, couldn't get a subscriber. Like it was so hard because it's already full. Like you're trying to fight your way. Now I'm not saying don't post on it because you will over time work your way through. So same thing happened when TikTok got on. If you look at most of my videos, they're at the very beginning. Got all the subscribers. I'm up to like it's like 60,000 or something.
Woo.
Now you can't even get like it's so hard to get like one or two.
Oh yeah.
Like because it's full because the videos did way better back then. Now I even repost some of my old content to see kind of how it would do way less views. So these platforms definitely, once they get their people, they kind of block you out, and it's so hard to work your way up. I talked to one person and they're like, yeah, if you're on those platforms, you got to pay your way up. That's the only way you're going to move up is like, you got to slowly, pay for views and stuff. And that's the way that they really push it. But there's going to be a new platform that comes out and they're going to need someone who produces content. And when you see that, jump on it, no matter how stupid you think it is. Because
I've tried that, man. I tried that with Clapper, if you've heard of that. That was crap.
yeah, but it never took off. You got to get lucky. You got to get one, it's when it's happening, and it has to take off at the same time. You got to have both. Like, and I've done platforms before that never went anywhere and waste of complete time. Like I tried Threads for a while.
Oh, what a shit show that was.
Yeah.
I still, but it's weird. Like, I feel like I'm operating in a different universe version of Threads because I see all these posts of people going like, oh, I thought my engagement would be terrible here, but lo and behold, it's changed my life. And now I've got like hundreds of thousands of viewers. And I'm like, well, you must not be using the same shit that I'm using because I can't get nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. But yeah, but like, and then treat it like all those people out there, you have to treat it like a research project constantly because they're constantly changing everything. That's the hard part. Like what used to work for me back in the day, I was like, that doesn't work anymore. Like to get things, but I'm in a different, like for me, I don't really benefit more by more subscribers. So I don't really care. So like for me, I create content and I pay advertise it out because that's how I get my business. And so,
I mean, I've changed it too. Like, I don't, my focus is not to become like a TikTok star or get like millions of followers. Like, yeah, that'd be great. But like, I look at it the same way you do is like, how can I make a living out of this?
yeah,
Patreon subscribers, that's a key one because that's regular income. Or if my YouTube ever gets enough watch hours, then, through that scheme, through making money on there, through views. There are ways, and I've identified all of those, but it's like, I don't know. These days, I focus much more on my community, the people that follow me on and watch my content across different platforms. Thank you, everybody that does. I love you all. there's a lot more value in that, especially over time. And there's more meaningful interactions. Plus, they act as your biggest supporters and are invaluable in attracting new people. When I do
Oh
live
yeah.
streams sometimes, and some of the people in my community will mention stuff I do elsewhere, like on the Patreon, people are like, oh, wow, that's great. And it means so much more coming from them than it does me, because I can say anything. I'm essentially a salesman if you really think about it. But when they say, oh, yeah, the content there is brilliant, you should check it out, that's another person that they have no reason to say that unless they're telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And having people like that, it's way better than like the amount of people you have. Because like,
Yeah, 100%.
when you have people that actually resend out your, I shouldn't say retweet, because Twitter's never worked for me.
Yeah, me neither. I tried so much. I
Uh,
still post there. I still post with, I don't know why. I just look at it like it's a free platform, might as well, but it's never going to go anywhere. Like,
nah, it's designed for people that you have to. It's like tribal groups. Like you have to join a tribe, and then become obsessed with whatever that is.
yeah.
Whether you're the Trump tribe or some political group or some religious group, and that's how
Wait,
Twitter
I
works.
tried. I thought I could get because I like wrestling. I'm a massive
Oh,
wrestling fan, and I thought like I'd get on wrestling Twitter, and I still just post and retweet stuff because I love wrestling. But I
yeah.
thought get like, oh, I can get in on this. I've even spoken about wrestling on the show before. I've had wrestlers on the show. Nothing. Couldn't get anything. Most I ever got was like a big tweet about CM Punk years back. It went viral somehow, but that was it.
Yeah. It's the weirdest stuff that actually works. Like you're like, that went viral out of all things that I've created. That's the thing
Oh,
that
it's always
works.
something stupid. My biggest TikTok video was as such. It was, I don't even know if they still do that. Can you still do oh, what are they called when you like take part of a stitch? They still have stitches
Yeah,
on TikTok. Yeah.
I'm
So
sure.
I did a stitch and it was really stupid. It was a guy making a joke about the weather in the UK and like how they told him it would be great and it's like pissing it down outside the window. And I reacted to that because in the video he'd said something like come to the United Condom, it will be nice. And I looked in the comments section to check that it wasn't like he was a comedian, he was saying that on
Yeah.
purpose. People were like, what are you saying? And then I stitched and went like, United what? How dare you? And then
Uh,
that went viral. That got nearly
yeah.
3 million views. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It's not funny, it's not clever. I was just being silly, and
Yeah.
that's what got some attention.
Yeah, I know. It's the weirdest stuff that gets out there. I don't know. It's like I've done some of this. I'm like, I did one that was like I thought was like, oh, this is incredibly important information. Nobody watched it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's what's important, but it's weird. It's just sometimes you hit the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. I always wonder about that when I post clips because I have a clips channel. I use it for TikTok. I have it on Instagram and I have it on YouTube as well. And what I tend to do is put shorter form clips on. I put long form clips as well on the TikTok now and places like that because for some reason they've opened it up now. So as long as you don't go over 10 minutes, you can upload that and they'll actually push it. Weirdly enough,
Yeah.
so people are beginning to watch that. Anyway, YouTube I think is always going to be the home of like larger form content. That's just how it is. But every time I post a clip, I'm like, oh, this will be it. This will be the one. Or this will get a bit of attention. And
Yeah.
yeah, every now and again, you'll get some clips, get some attention. Like I actually had one that got way more than the actual podcast itself got. I just laughed at that. It was really funny. Um, but I don't know. Like every time I do it, like I kind of my approach now is just make the content, put it out there, have a little look, and then move on. Like don't hang on it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Just focus
Yeah.
on.
Just keep making stuff because you never
Mhm.
know. It's it really is a secret to almost anything. It's because it's a weird. It's kind of like what really happens to the process of making more things is things open up to you on ways that you can do stuff that you never thought before. And that's really what, like, for me, I've done like 10,000 estate plans. I cringe at the ones that I did at the beginning because there's so many things I just didn't understand. But it's the weirdest things. I'll sit with somebody and either the client will tell me something or something just pops into my head and I'll go, oh, this is how I should be doing this. And I'm going to be honest, like I feel like now I learn more than ever on when I'm doing things because I can see things so much better than I could see it when I started. And
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. This definitely this for me, this show has been that. When I first started this show, I had like no idea what I was doing. I just wanted to do a podcast because I'd always wanted to do one. And I wasn't sure if it was going to just be me talking or if it was going to be like an interview show. Eventually, I settled on it being an interview show, but I'd not really figured out. I was still kind of trying to figure out like my cadence, whatever. In the end, I just kind of chilled out a bit more and tried to focus on the task at hand. Do a good interview, do a good conversation, get people drawn in on that, you know. And I stand by it, man. Every show of this podcast offers something a little different. But what you will always get, which is a constant, is that I am engaged in this conversation. Like I want to be here. I get fascinated every time I get to do this because it's the same process, man. I sit down like when we booked a show together, right? I sat down, I looked at your TikTok, I looked at everything that you do, and I was like, right, I'm gonna have to sit down and research this, figure this out, and figure out how to put a good show together. And the funny thing is, like, I rely a lot less on my notes now than I did years ago. Now it's like I'll still use this to kind of guide me here and there, or if there's like a reference point, but mostly it's just being here in this moment and just like I've thrown a bunch of questions that I've come up with off the top of my head because I've just wanted to genuinely ask those questions. And I figured
yeah,
out that the biggest thing with a podcast or an interview show of any kind is you need, it sounds really obvious, but you need to like actually be engaged in the conversation and not just be going through the motions. That's why so many podcasts, interview shows like suck because the host is not really caring about the guest or the topic. They're just like, oh, so what's your
yeah,
5 favorite laws? Or like, what was the craziest, I don't know, client you ever had? Like, wow, okay,
yeah.
clip that. You know, it's too formulaic. You know, like the reality is probably the best clip you'll ever make or the best interaction you'll ever have will just be something right off the cuff, just out of nowhere. Like, you know, what I'll tend to do is when I finish a show, I'll sit back and I'll watch the whole thing and just sort of experience it as a viewer. Like I'll edit it and stuff, but I'm experiencing it and I'll think like, yeah, that was a good conversation. And that was a good conversation because we covered this and because and this is something I really love to do is I like to make my guests feel as comfortable as possible. You know, because the reality is I'm talking to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And there's a certain degree of adaptability. I'm sure people that listen to the show have seen that with me. Like I adapt myself a little bit. I'm not changing myself, but I'm kind of trying to adapt myself to my guests so as to kind of make the guest feel comfortable so that we get a better conversation as a result. It's taken me years to do that. And
Yeah.
that's the reality of it, I think, really, isn't it? It's like you're constantly tweaking and working at it and trying to figure out what works. And once you got it, I don't know, like I feel very confident in this. I don't know why. I know this show isn't successful, but I tell you what, like it is successful in terms of like all the amazing guests that I've had on the show. The feeling I get every time I walk away. I know I've said this a few times, guys. You're hearing the speech again, but I don't know. It feels different. I was thinking about it the other day. Like I'm very lucky that I get to do this, and I'm proud of this show and what it
Well,
offers.
can I give you what like how
Go ahead.
much you have right now as content? Like that is so valuable right now. Just going back and taking highlights from the years that you have that you had in your head. If you could go and like the best video I ever made was I took a bunch of my other videos and I combined 10 of them at the top 10 things. And I'm like, oh, this is stupid. And I put them all together because it was like jumping between different like areas of different. I'm like, this isn't going to really work. It got over 1 million views, and I'm like,
Wow.
for some reason, but you have so much content right now. Like, you probably have a top 10, if you could just go through your head and write it down, of clips that were like, this was awesome, and put those together. Because in all reality, that's like, I remember when I first started seeing Joe Rogan stuff, and I was like, why would anybody sit there and watch that thing for 3 hours? Like, I could not understand. But it was, oh, someone put a little clip, but it was somebody, it wasn't Joe Rogan. Someone put together like a bunch of clips of his of different people. And I'm like, oh, that was actually really interesting. Him talking to all these people. Like, and so that's how I started seeing his content more and more and more, is because of that one video that someone posted. But you did all the hard work already. You've already interviewed all the people. It's all there. It's just go get those clips and put them in one little video and string it together. And that's, I mean, that kind of stuff is what's going to really get people, because people have attention spans for like, you got them for 15 seconds.
I think, to be honest, I need help with it. Like, I do everything myself, and that, like, no one ever talks about that when it comes to setting up a podcast. People learn through doing it, like how much hard work it is, but I don't think many people talk about what goes into it. And the reality is, if you're doing it by yourself, it takes so much time and effort. That's why I
Yeah.
only do this show once a week,
Yeah.
because that is tough. Like, the reality is, this is the easy part, guys. The conversation is the easy, but it's the part I look forward to. Everything else is like the tough part: the research, the the structure of the episode, and then you got to watch it, cut it up, upload all the socials, promote it. It's a whole process. And I love the process. I love that people will get to see it and listen to it and enjoy it the same way I got to enjoy it. But when it comes to like trying to reach people, it's hard. Like, for instance,
Yeah.
I uploaded a clip early from my latest episode. It's not out yet, but I just wanted to throw it out there because it was a good story. And the first comment, the only comment, was someone saying, uh, long story short, yawn, or something like that. And I just laughed, and I was like, it's a clip from a podcast. They're supposed to be long, no? Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And like, I like stuff like that because, obviously it drives engagement, and, any reaction is a good reaction, because it's
Here, I'm going to put out to one of your followers. Maybe somebody's watching this right now. He's going to work a deal with you. You can create like the JRE, like, you know what the JRE was? That
Joe
some
Rogan
guy,
experience.
yeah, like some guy created the short clip thing. Like, that wasn't
Ah.
Joe Rogan. And that's what really propelled him. That's what you need. You need some kid to like go, that's just some young kid sitting in his house. Go ahead, go create your own YouTube channel. Take my clips, go put them together, and you can just run them on your YouTube. I'm totally okay with it. Go with it. And there's going to be like some 13-year-old that just sit there. He'll spend 5 hours every night and put that together for you.
I'll say this as I would be happy with someone giving that an attempt, but I want to still have my clips there. But no, I mean, yeah, like anything that's going to help me drive business. I think, do you know what? I'll say this much. If I was able to just like earn a living, because I'm not obsessed with money. Like, I know there's people out there that have to own like literally everything, whereas for me, if someone did that for me and it meant that I could earn money elsewhere, yeah, go ahead, man. I don't mind. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's
well, YouTube gives you a percentage of it.
sure, yeah, but like, I just like this, like, I don't know. The only reason I don't have like staff or paid people on payroll is because I can't afford it. But that's something I've always wanted to do. People have offered over the years, like, I'll do this for you, and I'm like, I can't let you do that for free. It's just not right. It doesn't sit well
Yeah.
with me, you know. Um, and particularly because I'm kind of like OCD with like how I approach it, so I want it a certain
Yeah.
way, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. But if I want it like that, I got paid people really.
Yeah. That's always the hard part, the control of wanting it to do. But see, it's the young people. They know what's like
Yeah.
works. they're the ones that like they come in and they're like, oh, you don't use this platform, you use this, and you do this way, and I'm like, I don't get all of it. Like, I don't know how you guys figure all that stuff out.
There it is, man. That's how it is. I've got like final few questions for you. One's related to what we've spoken about today. The rest are not. Um, what are the biggest life lessons that estate planning and probate law and every other part of law that you're involved with have taught you?
Um, what I've witnessed from people is, uh, if you have the ability to, you have to figure out somehow to be organized and put things together. I've really learned that let's just use taxes as an example. I've watched as I've looked at how much people pay in their taxes and those who pay far less, and the difference between the life between the two groups, because one guy works his butt off. He does everything he can, but he's very unorganized. It's all over the place. And how powerful entities just take advantage of people like that. They're eating at them just a little bit here, a little bit there. They're not watching their finances. They're not. And then I'll have these people come in that are incredibly organized. And one, it's how much more wealthy they are because they nitpick little things. They're in there going, okay, somebody's taking $50 a month because of this, or they actually go through. In America, we have these things called 401ks for retirement. They actually go through their 401k policy and find out how much fees that they're being charged, and they actually care about how much they're paying in taxes because they get eaten at. And it's this thing of not realizing, like, powerful institutions have figured this out. They figured out how to just get a little bit out of everybody every month and kind of whittle you down, and you feel overwhelmed when it's just simple things of getting things organized and put into place. And so if you could just start taking time out of your life and go, okay, I need to get things put in place, organize my life. I understand when you're a creative person, that's harder because is that right brained, right? The right brain is
Mm.
the creative side where you're always like wanting to do something new. And it, sounds like misery to sit there and go, you want me to go through like a spreadsheet and like figure out exactly how much I'm paying for every little thing.
Got a spreadsheet,
And
and
uh,
I'd still like the reality is I just don't earn enough. But I've got it all planned out. I'm good at budgeting. Just need to earn.
yeah,
But yeah, no,
yeah,
you're spot on, man. It's very important, especially when you map it out like that, guys. Like it honestly like helps you see things a lot clearer.
yeah. And like for you, it's like, okay, well, you have tons of data from what you post, but are you going back and like looking at, okay, I post this. What time did I post? Why did this one do better than that one? Really analyzing those things. There's people that do that, they're able to start cutting the corners and getting ahead of everybody else because they see the path. You've got the habit down, right? That okay, I'm posting content, I'm posting content, I'm posting content. Now it's the next step of analyzing, go through. And I've met so many people that you find the people that like are like that. They have that behavior that they're very much into these, figuring out the little things that work, and then they're able to propel themselves. And that's the fun thing for me. I get to meet some of the most interesting people. Like now, of course, I don't get a post on online what they would want to say because they don't really tell their secrets to the world. But I get to see what they do, and it's often or not they're the people that will just sit and really look at things, and they find the little ways to get ahead, and those little ways over a long period of time significantly increase any capacity in anything. And so, especially when it comes to money and taxes, those who learn to actually cut out their extra taxes, propel themselves so much farther, and then control your expenditures that you have.
Thanks for sharing. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Um, Spend more time on yourself than anything else, because at the end of the day, like Christian, you'll never be able to hire someone with your talent. You're never going to be able to afford that type of person, and they would never work for you. Same thing with me. They're not going to. So you have to figure out some way to increase your capacities, um, because you're you're unique. That's why you're doing this. You're not like just anybody. You can go hire someone that will enter data into a computer, then go home and watch a TV show and do that every day. Yeah, you'll get to that point one day, but you'll never ever be able to hire you. And so you have to increase your ability.
Damn, that's a powerful one. Thank you.
It's not mine. It's not my. It wasn't my advice. It was just something someone told me one day, and I was like, "Oh, that's true."
No, thanks for sharing that, man. It's spot on. Like I do set very high standards in what I expect. And I forget about that sometimes. Like not everyone shares that vision. Everyone's first and foremost for themselves, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's like, what is it Nurse Sharif said recently? Don't spend your whole life building someone else's dream, like, work on your own. I think that's very important. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Biggest life lesson. Was something that really people really don't know what they're talking about. It's probably like when it comes to your life.
Yeah.
Like I have 5 kids. I had them all when I was in my 20s.
So
And
can we just stop for 1 second, right? You said you're in your 40s
yeah,
and you have 5 kids.
yes. But I mean,
How do you look this good? What's the secret, man?
My wife does everything. No, everybody, I remember when I had my first kid, they're like, you shouldn't have kids this young. Everybody kept saying
Whoops.
that to me. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I just said, well, that's what I want to do. I want to have kids. Like, I want to have a big family. That's what I want to do. And I did it anyway. And now looking back, I look at it and I was like, I'm so glad I did. I'm glad I didn't listen to anybody else. One thing, it forced me to really, really hone my skills to provide for a family when I didn't have much. But it's like, you get only one life, and figure it out, and do what you think you want to do with it. As long as I mean, of course you got to be wise about decisions you make. Like, okay, I'm not saying go out and do drugs. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. But when you have a dream, there's a book called The Alchemist, and he called it like, he had a term he used throughout the whole book, something about your legacy. He said everybody has a legacy that they're supposed to accomplish, but for some reason it's revealed to you at some point of your life. It's given to you what you're supposed to do, but most people won't go do it. And The Alchemist, the story is this boy is told that he's supposed to find a treasure that's buried under the pyramids. And so the whole book is this boy trying to get to this treasure that's buried under the pyramids, and that how everybody's telling him that's stupid. You shouldn't do that. You're wasting your life, but he knows this is his legacy, what he's supposed to do. And I think it's a great book, in teaching people that, hey, you have a legacy. There's something you're supposed to do with your life. Doesn't necessarily need to be grand. I'm not saying like, oh, you got to change the world. You got to be the next president of the United States. Sometimes it's, you got to be a good father. That's your legacy. That's what it'll be revealed to you when it is. Listen to it, and don't let people try to persuade you not to do it. Mine was to be a father. That was mine. And that's what
awesome.
I've been trying to.
I know what you mean. Right now, I feel like I'm on the precipice of something. I haven't exactly figured out what it is. There's a lot of things I do in my life. I do acting, music, obviously podcasting, content creation. But the thing I've noticed, the thread that links them all is I'm always talking to people or in some way affecting people emotionally. There's always something there. And I think that is what maybe I can offer to the world is to somehow inspire people or push people to chase their dreams in some way. I don't know. Like, it's kind of ironic with my life as well. I've never really shared this, but like, you know, when I was younger, like I was a very insecure kid, and you know, like I'd never believed in myself. Like younger me, teenage me would never have been able to relate to me now. Like to imagine that I'd become this person, it just would have been out of the realms of expectation, really. And to think that we got this to this stage, like I obviously remember like what it took to get here, and like that's part of it. But also, as you say, it's this point where you realize it's like Neo in the Matrix. You begin to believe. It just clicks one day, and then you. The important part is to accept it, as you say. Like you go, okay, this is what I offer. All right, let's do this. Let's make sure that this, above all else, is the thing that I do better than anything else. So if my, I don't know, legacy, as you put it, is to inspire people, to push people to chase their dreams, then I'm gonna do that to the very best of my ability, and hopefully it works out. I don't know. See.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately some people spend their whole life dedicated to something and never get recognized until after what they passed away, and then people found what they created to be of great value to them. But yeah, you like reading books. The Alchemist is an old book. I don't know how old it is, but it's a short one. It's meant for like teenage kids, but it is a great book in the sense of going, oh yeah, there is something, some goal, something, and when you're striving for something unique, it's hard because this boy goes on this adventure and everybody thinks he's crazy, and he even thinks he's crazy, but he just has this feeling this is what he's supposed to do, and he goes through and he learns along the way that it's one step at a time as you're doing it. Your path is revealed to you, and then yeah, I think he calls it intuitions. You develop these intuitions
Mm.
of like here's the next step, but um, it very much is that idea that there's a path that you're supposed to do in your life. I really think the more that I've learned about things, this idea that we live in some type of simulation is probably true. Because I get a little obsessed with physics. I've always been obsessed with it my whole life. And every time I start reading into it, I'm like, this stuff doesn't make any sense. Like, I like, this is so weird when you get into quantum mechanics. I'm like, none of this stuff is like, how is this like? And I'm like, maybe Elon and all them are right. Because for a long time, I thought it was just like, oh, those guys are just weird. But like, maybe they are right. Maybe this is some like type of simulation that we're in these avatar bodies trying to figure something out. And I have no idea what's really going, but all I know is the more that I look at it like that, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I look through my life and it's like almost like it's kind of like I'm supposed to be doing something.
I gotta say, I think you're onto something as well, because like when I look at that, like I take a lot more risks now than I used to, and I almost feel like it's a game. Like, what do I have to lose? You know, like why not just try things, see what happens, roll the dice. Like, for instance, I started gigging recently again in music. My main goal is to try and do like acting and voice acting and stuff for a living, right? But obviously, I'd be happy with any of my creative stuff happening. Music wasn't something I was trying to actively chase, but I thought about it differently for once. I was like, well, what if this would lead to other opportunities? What if this would in some way help me do something? And right now it's giving me an opportunity to make money, which is great. It's giving me an opportunity to reach people, meet new people, you know. But it's funny how years ago I used to be scared about the concept of the future and what to do and how to approach things. And now I'm not scared at all. Like I don't even think about it. I'm just like, let's just keep throwing stuff around, see what happens, see how the game responds. Like I don't know. It's I agree with you. I think there's something there. Like I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but I don't know. Roll the dice, I guess.
What? Yeah, one guy said it the best. I was listening to this guy and he was trying to explain. He goes, what are the odds that you could have 8 billion people on a planet with all the technology, everything that we have with nuclear weapons, and we don't blow this whole thing up? It's like it definitely seems like something's in control because it's like there's too many crazy people. It's like there's too many like things that would just don't seem like it would turn out. And it's like the odds, someone has to do that calculation and figure that out. What are the odds that this actually has gotten to the point that it is? And it's kind of like also the same thing with your life. It's like think of all the things that things could have gone wrong. And for some reason it turned out for you. Now it took a lot of work. Took a lot of work during that time. And I'm not saying that you didn't make a lot of good choices and do right things, but there's a lot of times in your life that it's almost like a game. Like somebody on the other side was turning dials for you, going, "Oh wow, that was really dumb what he just did. We got to save this." And I look at my life and think of there's a couple times like that where it's like, man, that probably wasn't the best decision, but things worked out in the end. And and but that's the thing. If I give to young people, anybody that's trying to go through their life, just understand that figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Stop listening to other people tell you what you're supposed to be doing. Spend a lot of time sitting and thinking, meditating on that, and then go for those things. And most of that will revolve around you bettering yourself. So it's been mine when I sit there and reflect. It isn't, oh, so and so needs to change, or this person needs to do this for me, or it's like, oh, I need to start doing this. I need to be a better person here. That kind of stuff.
Final question for you to round things up. Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Um, I always have a bunch of projects. I've been writing a book for 10 years. I don't think I'll ever get it done. It's the history of estate planning.
Oh wow.
So
It's a
yeah,
big
I like to go back into history and like find stories of what people did to pass on their legacies. And so hopefully someday I'll get that book finished. I haven't been working on it the last 2 months, and I'm like, okay, I need to get back to it. But uh it's like I have a business I have to run that I have to fix things constantly. And so it distracts me.
Well, I wish you the very best of it, man. I hope you do publish that book. I think it would be very interesting to see, and I wish you the very best with everything you're doing. I think it's great work, and helping a lot of people both online and with your business. And it's been an absolute blast talking to you and having you on the show, man. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your life with us.
Thank you. And by the time you reach 300 episodes, your thing's going to blow up.
Never know.
I have a feeling, man, by the time you get to 300, it's gonna take off. It's gonna hit a level you never thought would ever hit.
There it is.
I'm sending out that energy into your universe.
I appreciate you, man. I think it deserves to. And you know the biggest thing about it as well is it's not just like what I would love to see happen. It's like I want the show to reach people because I think that the concept is worth it. Like inspiring people. Like I challenge anyone to listen to any episode of this show and not walk away with something positive or inspirational in some shape or form. And that has always been my key takeaway. Like I've learned a lot in this show and it's been very inspiring. And that's how I feel every time I come out of it. I'm like interested, intrigued, excited. I love doing this. It's made me a better conversationist. I enjoy talking to people in general in life now and just learning in general, growing. It's all part of the process, man. Yeah, a massive thank you again, man.
Hey, no, thank you. I think you're on the you're probably the best podcast interviewer I've had so far. So,
well, thank you, man. That's just kind words.
Yeah, I've only done about 20. So, but still,
holy shit.
There are other people that do this too.
Yeah,
you have the best ability to have a conversation.
Well, thank you, man. That means a lot to hear.
So you figured out that part of it. Just keep making the content. Keep making the content. It's great.
I will. To all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did. As always, if you're watching and listening on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, please leave us a review, a rating. Really helps the show out in terms of growing. I've seen a few people have been commenting on Spotify, so thank you very much for that. I'll keep posting those on Instagram and stuff and promoting that. So very thank you for people that have been doing that. I mentioned it earlier, but if you would like to support the show and what I do, go on to patreon.com/Christian Reeve. You get yourself monthly content, access to my Discord community, my general just journey in life in general. Lots of behind the scenes stuff. Go check it out. Also, go check out Taylor Willingham online. You can find him. I'll leave links in the description and check out his work and everything he does. And most importantly, be safe, be well, and I'll see you, as always, in the next one.